What's going on, guys? My name is Jason. Today we are going to be talking about how to make pizza dough from scratch. In my opinion, a great pizza starts with the pizza dough. We just made a video on how to make cast iron pizza. We'll have the link to that video in the description below. The pizza was delicious, the cheese was gooey, the toppings were really amazing, but it all wouldn't have mattered if the dough tasted like cardboard. The dough was actually very airy, it was also crispy and chewy all at the same time. We'll share with you the recipe that we use to make the pizza dough, but before we do that, I want to go over a few basics on the type of dough that we're making. If you want to skip these basics, go ahead and check out the timestamps below. First things first is you want to decide what kind of pizza you actually want to make with the dough. There's a lot of different styles of pizza. The type of pizza we're going for is Neapolitan. The crust is a lot more airy. It's not as structured as American pizza where the crust is more thick, it's more dense, and it's not like Roman pizza where the crust is more like a flatbread or a thin crust. It's softer, but it has a chewiness to it. Second step is you want to decide what type of flour you're going to use for your pizza. Hands down, the best flour to use is going to be Tipo 00 or 00 flour. 00 refers to the grind, which in this case, that's the finest grind that you can get. 00 flour is very high in protein, which will help create that structure that we need for the crust. Since we don't have 00 flour, we're using bread flour as a substitute because it also has very high protein, which again will help with the structure of the dough. The last thing is the hydration level for your pizza dough. The more water you use for your dough, the more airy it's going to be because when it's in the oven, the steam evaporates and creates those large pockets of air in your dough. Since we're making a Neapolitan style pizza, we're gonna have a very high hydration level. To find the hydration level, all you have to do is take the total amount of water that you're using and divide it by the total amount of flour that you're using. For our recipe, we're using 600 grams of water or 600 milliliters. Divide that by 900 grams of flour, which gives us a hydration level of 67%. So when you're making dough at 67%, the dough will be very sticky. You could reduce the amount of water to maybe about 60% if you want the dough to be easier to maneuver, easier to roll out and to make into dough balls. But again, that will change the amount of air pockets that's in your crust. All right, so let's get started with the recipe.
600 grams of water in the stand mixer, 3 grams of dry active yeast, 6 grams of honey, 30 grams of olive oil, 15 grams of kosher salt, 600 grams of bread flour, and another 300 grams of bread flour for later. So I'm going to add the yeast and the honey to the water. Give it a stir and then let it sit for about 5 minutes. That should be enough time for the yeast to activate with the honey, and you should see some bubbles surface. Then you'll know it's ready. So I see some bubbles, so now I'm going to add in about half the flour, let it knead a little bit, and then just add in the other half. So the hook attachment is basically kneading for you. So I'll start it off on a lower speed. At this point, it's pretty much all incorporated. There's some lumps and that's okay. I'm just going to cover this with a dry towel and let it sit for an hour, and we'll add the rest of the flour. It's been an hour and this is what it looks like. Now we're going to add the rest of the flour, oil, and salt. And the reason you don't want to add the salt in earlier is because it basically prevents the yeast from doing its job. But now that it's sat around for an hour, we can add it. Oil and the rest of the flour. And we're going to let this mix for about 10 minutes until it pulls from the sides. Now that the dough is done mixing, we dust our work surface and our hands, pour out the dough, and knead the dough. We knead it for a few minutes, then form it into a giant ball. Once we have our giant ball, we place it into an oiled bowl and top it off with about a tablespoon of olive oil. We cover the bowl with plastic wrap and a dry towel and let it rest. Usually we let it rest at room temperature for about an hour before portioning the dough into individual 250 gram dough balls. But this time we started making the dough really late, so we went to sleep instead and let it rest overnight, which turned out really well. In the morning we created 6 250 gram dough balls with this recipe. So again, we dust our work surface, pour out the dough, and we pull apart a portion of the dough. We have an idea of what 250 grams of dough looks like, but we weigh it with our scale just to be sure. After our dough balls are portioned out, we cover them with plastic wrap and a towel and let it rest for another 6 hours before we make our pizzas for our friends. Each dough ball makes one 11-inch pizza in our 12-inch cast iron. If you want to see how we use the dough to make cast iron pizzas, be sure to check out the link in the description down below. We hope you give making dough at home a shot. I know I was really intimidated initially because I had to deal with yeast and I never dealt with yeast before, but it really wasn't that difficult and wasn't that hard. It does take a little bit of patience since you do have to give the dough time to rest, but it's well worth it. We hope you liked this video, and if you did, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe if you're not already subscribed, and let us know in the comments down below what your favorite style of pizza is. We'll see you in the next video.